Hello everyone, and welcome to week 1 of our setup tutorial shorts. So I'll be trying to explain some sort of setup concept in a 5-minute video, hopefully within 4 to 6 minutes each week, and hopefully that sort of helps people learn how setups work and get a basic understanding. So let's get right into it. The Aero calculator is one of our most important tools that we have for tuning the car. In particular, any high-speed open-wheeler, this will be very important just because obviously aerodynamics come into play much more than, like, for example, a Mazda Miata. You're not going to really have much aerodynamic influence in comparison. So getting into it, just recognize that, like, aerodynamics is one aspect of the car. There's a lot of other things at play going on. So, like, just recognize the real world isn't a perfect science. The simulator is emulating something in an even more imperfect way. So while it's a tool, it's not something that should be used as like an end-all be-all savior solution, because you can miss out on some key things, or you might just end up going slower and wonder why. Just take every adjustment, like, use it as a guide basically. Don't use it as something super seriously, because otherwise you're gonna end up not living up to your potential with this calculator. So first up, you have average ride heights at speed. Basically, you're just gonna plug in these from Motec. I'm going to go with this last just because it's easier to deal with later. And you have your front downforce and downforce to drag. So your front downforce is just telling you how much downforce do I have on the nose, relatively speaking. Typically this number will sit, I'd say from DW12 to IR18, like 38 to 47%. I've seen it. Typically you'll see it in the upper echelon now with the IR18, so I'd say 44% is a pretty solid number to start with. And then we have our downforce to drag, which basically is it tells us our aerodynamic efficiency. Now you have to remember this doesn't account for total downforce, so what that is telling you is basically you can enhance this number, but you may sacrifice your aerodynamic balance and you may sacrifice total downforce. And what that means is, like, you can potentially reduce drag with the aerodynamic options, and this number will actually go up. And you'll be like, oh, well, my downforce to drag is better, but I'm not seeing it on the lap time. That's because you're losing downforce, and that downforce is really well needed. So I'll give you guys my trick that kind of helps me adjusting for total downforce, and I'll show you guys an example of how this can go bad. So going through, like, the aerodynamic options, what I typically do is, if you're trying to keep total downforce constant, you have your front downforce percentage, and that's a good way to notice how you keep things constant. So if you, for example, adjusted the front aero and the rear aero at the same time, and you said, you know, okay, let's just, for example, go down on this front wing, and you're at -1, let's say, and you just keep going down, and we've lost quite a bit of front downforce, but that downforce to drag has gone up. Like, for example, going from 0.5 degrees of wing angle right here, and we just keep going down. And then if we, for example, added downforce with the rear aero, you can see, okay, our downforce to drag is going up. But our issue here is we've added rear downforce, we've taken away front downforce, and our total downforce is probably decreased, and we have a lot less downforce on the nose. So that just shows like you can definitely mess things up, and it can get tricky really fast. So what I would recommend, and of course if you're advanced, you know, and I mean you can see that downforce to drag is actually better with this configuration, but just for purposes I switched this down just for informational purposes. But anyway, what I recommend with adjusting these kind of cars, and what I do when I'm adjusting, is keep your adjustments to one front downforce level and keep it to one either front or rear, right? Just while you're adjusting. So like for example, if I'm gonna touch this rear wing and say, okay, I'm gonna take some rear wing out, then I would recommend, you know, either balancing that with the front wing a little bit, take a little bit of front wing out and keep that front downforce constant and say, okay, I'm taking downforce out of the car. Or if I'm just saying I want to take rear wing out, then don't go up on the front downforce. Don't touch any of these options. Just go with it as slow as you can, and don't try and adjust like 10,000 things at once, because then you're just making it way harder for yourself. So the last thing I want to show you guys is just Motec. I will just exit out, and basically I can share some links on this forum post that I'll add, which will help you guys get up to speed with Motecs. But I'll just exit out of here, and then here we go. So Motec, for example, I can just load up my lap times here, and there's actually a few things that you can do, right? So for some people, they just kind of grab a point within turn one. So this is the fixed setup, and you can see that you have 0.35, 0.37 on the front, and then you have 0.7, 0.75. So some people, what they'll do is they'll double click and drag, and then you see this orange arrow right here, and that will tell you your average, or that's a diamond actually, sorry. This will tell you your average ride heights, and a good thing to add is your track map. I don't have that in this workbook. And then you can see your averages. So for example, 0.31, 0.35, those are the average corners. You can plug that in and say, okay, my corner ride height is like 0.33, and then the rear like 0.77, 0.76. And that's close enough for estimation. And then you can also, if you want to see the straight line attitude, which most people kind of just plug in the Aero calculator for the corner ride heights, just to see how the corners are doing. But if you want to try to adjust for the straightaways, which, I mean, you definitely can, I'm not against that, you can highlight it. You can highlight it all the way, actually. I would recommend looking at the track map, but you get the idea. And then you have your averages. That'll tell you a lot of things. And then, of course, looking at a total lap, you can also see your average ride heights. And then the last thing is that there is another option here, which is the tilt of the car. So, for example, you can adjust the Aero calculator now and say, okay, the right side is actually higher than the left side by 0.02, for example, or about 0.02 in the rear and 0.03 inches in the front, and that is where you're at in terms of your tilt. I don't remember if that's positive or negative. I would read the tooltip for that. And that's our short, I guess, is what the cool thing is now. So hopefully that helps you guys understand the Aero calculator a little bit, and have a nice day, and I'll see you guys next week. Alright, ciao.